"Boss, there's a high school dropout here." That day, I was invited to the wedding of the CEO of our client company. Usually I wore cheap jeans and t-shirts, so wearing a suit for the first time in a while felt tight. As I arrived at the venue and searched for my seat, I was spotted by Nancy, who was in charge of our account at that company. As soon as she saw me, she loudly started making a fuss about how out of place I was. Feeling uncomfortable under the stares of many people, the co-CEO, Tom, approached. "What's going on?" "It's noisy," he said. "Listen to this. He's a high school dropout, but he showed up at the wedding," Nancy exclaimed. Tom frowned as he looked at me where Nancy was pointing. "He's my best friend and co-partner," Tom said naturally, and the atmosphere instantly froze. Nancy's face grew tense. Just seconds ago, she was smug, but she quickly fell into despair. "My name is Joseph Wilson. By the time I became aware of things, my father had already passed away, and my mother raised me single-handedly. My mom worked tirelessly, day and night, to earn money for my school fees. To meet her expectations, I also threw myself into my studies. However, when I was a junior in high school, my mom collapsed from exhaustion. Most of the money she had earned went towards our living expenses and my tuition. After much deliberation, I decided to drop out of high school and start working. It wasn't easy for a minor to find a job in the real world. After failing several interviews, I finally got a part-time job at a convenience store. There, I became friends with a customer named David Brown. David was almost 40 at the time, close to my father's age. I was drawn to David's friendly way of speaking, and we became acquaintances who chatted occasionally. One day, David made me an offer. "You seem intelligent when we talk. If you'd like, why not work for me? I have a son who needs a tutor." Due to some circumstances, I had some confidence in my academic abilities, so I eagerly accepted the offer. Through this connection, I also started helping out at the small shop David ran. Eventually, David, who had high hopes for me, hired me as a full-time employee. I spent 10 years learning the know-how of business management there. When I turned 25, I officially took over the shop. "Joseph, you can handle things on your own now. I can retire in peace," David said with a laugh. He passed away 3 years ago after enjoying his retirement through travel and hobbies. This year, I turned 40. Now, running the shop on my own feels quite natural. However, the shop is now facing a crisis. The construction of a large supermarket is forcing us to relocate. There aren't many prominent buildings around the local train station, so there had been discussions about doing something to revitalize the area. However, they couldn't find the necessary funding or companies, so the plans were shelved. In recent years, a certain company stepped up for this development. That company is Sunset Corporation, a rising new major company that has been making a name for itself recently. The locals were thrilled and eagerly embraced this opportunity. The compensation for those living in the required areas was substantial, so there were hardly any hesitations about relocating. Though I had to relocate too, there was something that slightly worried me. I'll miss this shop once it's gone. Times change. The building was old, and I knew it would eventually be gone, but facing that reality was bittersweet. So I decided to consult with Sunset Corporation about the future of the shop. They offered me a spot in one corner of the new supermarket as a tenant after its completion. If possible, I would definitely like to take them up on this offer. With that in mind, I arranged for an explanation. The CEO was supposed to come to my house personally, but on the day of the meeting, he canceled. "I'm sorry, an urgent matter came up, and I can't make it. I sent my assistant with the documents, so please get the explanation from her," he said. A few hours after that call, the assistant arrived as promised. When I saw her face, I couldn't believe my eyes. The CEO's assistant was my high school classmate, Nancy Smith. Her piercing gaze and stern expression hadn't changed a bit. Nancy recognized me too, and she smiled as if she'd found something amusing. "I thought the name sounded familiar, but I didn't expect it to be you, Joseph. I had no idea you were working in such a rundown shop," she said. Her first words made my smile freeze. I had my thoughts, but I managed to brush off Nancy's attitude. "It's old, I won't deny that, but don't speak ill of it. It's a precious shop left to me by someone I owe a lot to," I replied. Oh, really? It's pathetic to be doing this kind of work at your age. No matter how smart you are, if this is your fate, it's laughable, she sneered. Nancy seemed genuinely happy to see me like this. The truth is, Nancy and I had a bit of history, though it was one-sided on her part. She had a strong dislike for me during high school. Back then, I studied hard to ease my mom's burden, even a little. As a result, I always ranked at the top of our class, while Nancy was always second. Nancy's family was wealthy, and she took many lessons and attended cram schools for her future. Despite all that, she couldn't surpass me, and she held a grudge for it. When I dropped out of high school, Nancy was the only one who laughed. After that, I studied hard and got into a top-tier university. I joined a major company right out of college, built my career, and now I'm with the rising star, Sunset Corporation. The gap between us is like heaven and earth. She seemed genuinely pleased to look down on me, forgetting she was here for work. Nancy sneered at me. That's impressive, Nancy. You always hated losing anyway. Can we get back to discussing the tenant space? I wasn't interested in our high school grudge. I tried to move on, but Nancy clicked her tongue in annoyance. I get that you're bitter about failing, but you need to understand your position. We could force you to move out, but the CEO is being kind by offering you these terms. I can't stand poor people because they're so brazen, Nancy said, tossing the tenant documents on the ground before leaving abruptly. Gathering the sand-covered documents, I sighed deeply, thinking about what lay ahead. It looked like I had a tough one to deal with. Asking the CEO to replace her would be too much. I figured I could endure for a few months. However, Nancy's harassment was just beginning. After agreeing to the tenant contract, I promptly submitted the demolition permit for the shop. I realized all the other buildings had already received their permits. Mine was the last one. Temporary housing and compensation for living expenses were already arranged. Nancy had explained that, so I wasn't worried for the time being. On the day of the move, I was taken to the temporary housing by Nancy. However, I was stunned by what I saw. The place I was to live in was a rundown apartment without a bathroom. I didn't expect luxury, but this was too much. I couldn't help but complain to Nancy. This is unacceptable. Haven't others complained as well? No one else would be put in such a dirty place. This is a special arrangement just for you, Joseph, Nancy said, glancing around the shabby apartment and chuckling. You lived in a dump before, so this shouldn't be any different. Also, manage with the minimum living expenses. $1,000 a month should be enough, right? $1,000 wouldn't cover food, utilities, and other expenses. I confronted Nancy. Does the CEO know about this? The contract mentioned proper temporary housing and living expenses. This is a breach of contract. Did you even read the contract? Nancy glared at me with a cold expression as I grew heated. It does say we guarantee it, but it doesn't specify the level or amount, does it? She pointed out. I hastily reviewed the contract. As she said, there were no specific amounts mentioned. Shoving me into such a terrible environment didn't technically violate the contract. This is why high school dropouts are so easy to handle. They don't understand society and can be easily manipulated, Nancy muttered, as if implying the CEO was complicit. I quickly denied it. No, this has to be Nancy's decision. There's no way a CEO of a major company would resort to such childish harassment. If you want to believe that, go ahead. In society, the weak are always exploited by the strong, Nancy said smugly. In that case, it's okay if I contact the CEO directly later, right? Nancy's face contorted with displeasure. The CEO is busy, unlike you. Such disruptive behavior would delay the development, so don't you dare. She stressed this point emphatically, indicating she really didn't want the CEO to know. It seemed clear this harassment was Nancy's doing. Though I wanted to report this immediately, causing a delay in the project due to personnel changes would be problematic for me as well. I decided to give up on the living expenses and temporary housing. I had some savings, so staying at a cheap hotel might be a good option. After hastily finishing the contract, Nancy was about to leave. However, after turning her back, she suddenly faced me again. Oh, by the way, I received this from the CEO. She proudly showed me a wedding invitation. Next month, the CEO was getting married, and it seemed like a luxurious ceremony was planned. Nancy seemed thrilled to be invited and waved the invitation in front of me. The companies were contracting with received invitations, but you didn't get one, did you? No, I didn't receive an invitation, I replied. Of course not. If a dirty pauper like you attended, it would ruin the venue. Just because I told you doesn't mean you should come begging for food, Nancy said, acting as if I were a beggar. Somehow, despite being a regular employee, Nancy had an invitation. Actually, the CEO's fiancée is my sister. My family is wealthy and influential, and it turns out the CEO is from a nearby town. It all fell into place. Your sister. It's a small world. Ultimately, those who have are drawn to each other. It's a world someone like you will never understand. Nancy continued to say rude things until the very end and finally left. Using even someone's happiness to belittle me was just the lowest. By this point, I didn't even feel angry anymore. I felt sorry for the CEO, who had an employee like her. Then, a week later, on the day of the CEO's wedding, I found myself at the wedding venue for a certain reason. Dressed in an unfamiliar suit, I made my way past the reception. The venue was astonishingly luxurious, and the smell of the food was mouth-watering. Everywhere I looked, I saw CEOs of famous companies and celebrities, making me realize how different their world was from mine. As I was looking around in awe, someone suddenly called my name. Joseph, what are you doing here? It was Nancy. As soon as she saw me, she ran over. Why are you here? Did you find the address on my invitation and come here uninvited? No, it's not like that. I was invited for a different reason. That can't be. Then show me your invitation. You do have it, right? Nancy demanded, leaving me at a loss. The truth is, I didn't have an invitation for a certain reason. As I broke out in a cold sweat, Nancy seemed to sense something and smiled. Then she raised her voice even more. So you came here without an invitation? Did you sneak in just to eat the wedding food? Her voice threw the attention of those around us. Ignoring this, Nancy continued, I guess living in such poverty would make you envy the lives of wealthy people like us, but that doesn't mean you can scavenge for food like a stray cat. She spoke as if scolding a child, causing the people around us to chuckle. I felt embarrassed and wanted to run away. Feeling victorious, Nancy reprimanded me harshly. This is a sacred place for the chosen ones from major companies. A poor high school dropout like you should leave. I'd wanted to leave immediately. At that moment, someone began making their way through the crowd toward us. It was none other than the star of the day, the CEO, Tom Brown. Tom glared suspiciously at Nancy, but she just smiled back. Boss, there's a high school dropout here, Nancy said. Tom frowned even more at Nancy's words. What's going on? It's so noisy. Listen to this. This guy came to the wedding, even though he's a high school dropout. A high school dropout. Are you talking about him? Nancy asked again to confirm. He came here without an invitation just to get free food. It's hilarious, right? Let's throw him out. Nancy was in high spirits, but Tom's next words wiped the smile off her face. He's my best friend and co-partner, Tom said, as if it were the most obvious thing. The atmosphere instantly froze. The statement was so shocking that even Nancy was momentarily stunned. What? Joseph and you are best friends and co-partners? Exactly. Joseph and I go way back, and I owe my success to him. Tom spoke proudly and glared seriously at Nancy. What have you been doing to such an important guest? Well, the lively Nancy from a moment ago was gone. Unable to keep up with the sudden turn of events, she could only mumble softly. How can you be best friends with this guy? He's a high school dropout working in a shabby shop. Nancy couldn't accept the situation and was becoming increasingly agitated. Seeing her confusion, Tom turned to me. Joseph, you and Nancy were high school classmates, right? She said that, so I assigned her to your case. What's going on? Tom's words made sense to me. Why was Nancy, not Tom, handling my case? It turned out she had volunteered for it herself. Originally, Tom would have handled it due to our long-standing relationship. It was sudden being told there was an urgent matter, which I found strange. I thought Nancy volunteered because she was interested in you. I never imagined it would turn out like this." Tom sighed in exasperation and began explaining to Nancy, "The shop you called small and dirty is my family's store." Nancy was left speechless by this revelation. As Tom said, that shop was his family store. Tom and I first met when I was hired by David as a tutor. The son David mentioned was Tom. Tom was always quick-witted and curious, becoming somewhat of a local famous person at his school. However, he would become so engrossed in things that he often lost sight of everything else, which led to him being viewed oddly at school. Such talents, which should be praised, sometimes become obstacles in a group setting. Tom was a typical example of this. He eventually struggled to make friends and became reclusive. Believing in Tom's talent, David asked me to be his tutor. "I think he's destined for greatness. He's not the kind of guy who will end up running a small shop, but I can only teach him so much. So, Joseph, can you show him the wider world?" "The wider world? I don't know much about that. I didn't even graduate high school and have only worked part-time jobs. Having a friend can open up the world. Plus, your struggles are a treasure that can't be learned in school. I want you to teach Tom about that too." That's how my relationship with Tom started. Being close in age, we quickly became friends. I loved studying, and Tom absorbed everything he learned. We made a great team. Over time, I learned Tom's strengths and weaknesses. He had a knack for new ideas and was excellent at sales, but he struggled with the theoretical aspects of management and operations. I, on the other hand, enjoyed calculations and business management, so we decided to start something together, which led to the founding of Sunset Corporation, where Tom is now the CEO. It started as a small company, but thanks to Tom's sales skills, we quickly saw success. Before we knew it, we had employees working for us. However, a problem soon arose. That was David's retirement. Losing the shop, a place filled with memories for Tom and me, was heartbreaking. After much deliberation, we decided that I would temporarily step away from the company to support the shop. I had never seen Nancy's name on the employee roster back then. She must have joined after I left. That's why she didn't know that Tom and I co-managed the company. Nancy, now fully informed, shook her head in disbelief. "That can't be. Your educational background was listed as university, right? I never heard you were a recluse." "Well, it's not something you typically tell people. Or do you not want to work under someone who used to be a recluse?" When Tom asked, Nancy vehemently denied it. "Not at all. I respect your exceptional planning skills and approach to work. Thank you. But all those skills were nurtured and brought to fruition by Joseph." Recalling the past, Tom gave a slight, soft smile. Then he immediately glared sternly at Nancy. "You've seriously insulted my best friend. You understand that's unacceptable, right?" Nancy could do nothing but tremble. "Today is my wedding day. It's an important day with many guests in attendance. I can't waste any more time on you." Tom quietly pointed to the exit, his gaze filled with anger. "Leave. Don't come to the office starting tomorrow. You will be informed about your punishment later. Please wait. Don't do this to me." Desperate for forgiveness, Nancy clung to Tom. "I have worked hard for the company. Yes, I might have been at fault this time, but it's a waste to throw away a talent like me for his sake. Please reconsider." Even after all that, Nancy still looked down on me without hesitation. She couldn't understand that this was what Tom despised. "I'm sorry, but I can no longer see you as a subordinate. You are talented. You'll do well elsewhere." Tom dismissed her. Nancy collapsed. She then glared at me with hatred. "Why didn't you tell me? Did you enjoy deceiving me?" "I didn't deceive you. What are you talking about? You did deceive me. You're close with the co-partner of the company, and you even lied about not getting a wedding invitation." The intensity of her anger made me brace myself, as if she might actually bite me. Why would I go out of my way to brag about being friends with the co-partner to an old classmate I hadn't seen in years? Besides, I'm currently not active in the company, so there's no need to explain the co-partner situation. As for the invitation, it's true I didn't receive an actual one. Tom personally called to invite me, so there was no paper invitation. I wouldn't explain things like that. You're the only one who cares about titles, like being friends with the CEO or being a co-partner. People who lack self-confidence often cling to labels. Nancy, who had always looked down on me, now wore a twisted expression. Her makeup was smudged. "I won't forgive you. I'll make you regret this. My parents are rich and influential in our town." In her rage, Nancy stormed into the bride's waiting room, intending to take her sister away. The staff stopped her, but the commotion escalated to the point where the police had to be called. Nancy was escorted out, and the continuation of the wedding itself was in jeopardy. Apart from the chaos, Tom was also racked with guilt for the way I had been treated, making him hesitate to continue the ceremony. Maybe this is a sign from God to cancel the wedding. What are you talking about? You've never believed in God. Seeing Tom's apologetic face reminded me of when we first met. Back then, Tom, who had just experienced unpleasantness at school, started to think everything was his fault. He believed his actions made others uncomfortable, leading to his exclusion. So I patted his shoulder and gave him the biggest smile. Do what you want to do. Don't worry about anyone who has something to say about it. Tom, who was exceptionally smart, also worried a lot. That's why I always supported him. I couldn't stand the thought of canceling the celebration for my best friend. I encouraged Tom, and he finally nodded. The wedding went on as planned, becoming the happiest day of my best friend's life. A week after the tumultuous wedding, construction began, and I was living in temporary housing. Of course, it wasn't the shabby apartment Nancy had arranged, but a decent place Tom had found for me. If you told me, I could have arranged something much better. Are you sure this is okay? Yeah, I prefer a simple life. Use the extra funds to help the other residents. Compared to the awful apartment I was in before, this temporary housing seemed quite good. With work temporarily on hold, I found myself with some rare free time. Then the intercom buzzed, and I wondered who it could be. I opened the door and was shocked to see Nancy standing there. After that incident, I was scared, but she now had a gentle look, as if her fangs had been removed. "You got a new place, right? I actually came to apologize to you, Joseph." Despite how much she had hated me, Nancy apologized to me. Her behavior was so different that I didn't know how to respond. "Weren't you arrested by the police?" "I wasn't arrested. I just got a little too excited. They let me go after a conversation." Indeed, she seemed much calmer than she did at the wedding. Still wary, I continued the conversation. "What happened with the company? Were you disciplined?" "It's a bit complicated, but my family is upset too, so if I can calm them down, I might get a second chance." Nancy's family supported the land development project. If they opposed it, the plan would face significant delays. Given that Tom's wife is Nancy's sister, this could become a serious issue. If preventing that means a lighter punishment for Nancy, it might be acceptable. I really regret what happened. I didn't know how hard you've worked, Joseph. I'm sorry for everything I said. Nancy said this while looking around the room. Your place is a bit messy. Are you eating properly? Well, sort of. I can cook something for you. Believe it or not, I'm a good cook. Without waiting for my response, she tried to barge into the room, not knowing her true intentions. I stopped her. An apology is enough. Could you please leave? I have things to do and need to head out soon. Heading out to see your girlfriend. Her prying made me cringe. Just a while ago, she was mocking me, and now she's acting like this. What nerve she has. When I bluntly replied, no, Nancy's face lit up with a creepy smile. Oh, then how about I go out with you? I'm pretty and a great cook. What do you think? It was so out of the blue that I didn't understand what she meant. Sensing something suspicious, I discreetly sent a message to Tom. Almost immediately, my phone rang. Who is it? Ha, it's my family. I'll be quick. Why don't you start cooking, and we'll talk after. I stepped outside to take Tom's call. Given his quick response, I knew something serious was up. Is it true Nancy is with you? Yeah, she's inside my temporary place and cooking. I don't understand the situation, but keep her there. I'm sending some people over. If Tom was going to such lengths, something significant must have happened. I finally understood Nancy's situation from Tom. Everything she had said earlier was a lie. Nancy had said her parents were angry but had calmed down, allowing her to avoid punishment. In reality, her family had disowned her. As prominent figures in the community, they were furious that their daughter had caused such a disgrace, especially by ruining her sister's wedding. No one defended her, and she was fired without question. If that were all, I wouldn't care what happened to her afterward. However, there was more to Nancy's darkness. She was putting heavy pressure on other contractors and temp residents too. Complaints had been pouring in. She'd been skimming off compensation funds and extorting kickbacks to line her pockets. Nancy had been behaving this way not only toward me but others as well. On top of that, she had been embezzling relocation and compensation funds, causing significant losses. Once this was discovered, authorities began searching for her. I never imagined things would escalate to this level. I hung up and rushed back to the room. Nancy, who seemed to have heard everything, looked at me and smiled quietly. "You heard everything, right? But can you blame me? I was better and worked harder. I deserve some rewards. What you're doing is a crime, and how do you plan to repay the money?" I asked. She was already fired and wouldn't receive any severance pay. Nancy, still smiling calmly, scared me. "That's why I came to you," she said, taking a step closer. I instinctively took a step back. "I'll be with you and make you happy in return. Give me money and freedom as a co-partner. You can cover this up, right?" I was speechless with disbelief. I couldn't help but frown. "No way. This is too big to cover up, and I don't intend to." "Why?" Nancy asked. "I've apologized and repented. It's a waste to throw away such a talented person over a moment of emotion." Nancy shouted, tears in her eyes. She probably knew it deep down. I delivered the final blow. "I don't find you that attractive. Sure, you had an impressive title, but now that all that's stripped away, what's left?" At that moment, there was commotion at the front door. Tom's team had arrived. "You should have focused more on your inner self, both towards others and yourself," I said as I opened the door. The team members rushed in, restrained Nancy, and took her away. She didn't say a word, seemingly absorbing my words. Nancy's punishment was formally decided. She was sued for $20 million in damages by Tom's company due to her various misdeeds. Disowned by her influential family and ostracized by the community, Nancy had the nerve to ask her sister, Tom's wife, for money. Naturally, her sister refused to forgive her. Rejected by her own sister, Nancy had no one left to turn to and eventually moved to a distant town. Rumor had it that she couldn't keep a part-time job, piled up debts, and had even started gambling on stocks. Most financial institutions wouldn't deal with her, but there was one shady company that lent her money generously. From what I found, it was a pretty sketchy company. With a large loan from them, it's unlikely Nancy will return to her old life anytime soon. As for me, once the large supermarket is completed, I'll return as a co-partner. I'll manage the tenant space for the shop while overseeing the entire company. The recent turmoil caused a lot of trouble and cleanup, but it also strengthened our resolve to rebuild the company. This experience will be crucial for revitalizing our community. There will be challenges ahead, but we'll face them head-on. With that mindset, my best friend and I continue to move forward each day.